Yeah, I think that the right course in that is for us to change our policy, and that is if a child is or a baby is born to people or a person who are that's here illegally, then it should not follow automatically that the family gets to come into the country because they have a U.S. citizen in the family. That I think is a policy which is misguided, and I think that's a policy we can change without having to deal with the issue of do we need to change the Constitution in some way. I don't think we reach that issue. I think instead we can change it on a policy basis. And frankly, how big of a problem this is would probably be clearer to us if we finally put in place the securing of the border, building the fence, having enough Border Patrol agents to secure that border, having in addition an employment verification system. You do those three things, and I think we'll get a much better sense of how big a problem chain migration is.
Mm-hmm. You made the distinction between addressing illegal immigration and embracing legal immigration. But in a post-9/11 world, we do have to reassess, don't we, who we let in from certain countries. And even after 9/11, even after knowing that we had handed out visas like Pez candy to the hijackers from Saudi Arabia through a fast-track program, we still have a lot of welcoming signals that we're sending to countries that maybe we should be giving a second look to. For example, the Bush administration just over the last year has decided that they're going to open up a program, this is in concert with the Saudi Kingdom, to allow Saudi Arabian students to come to our universities and study aviation. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, that certainly does raise some interesting questions. I had not heard of that policy, and given the tragic history of that setting, I think you have to question that particular policy. But I can tell you this: I do value legal immigration, and I believe there are many nations where the risk and threat of radical jihad is very small indeed. Nations in Latin America, Mexico, Canada, many of our friends around the world. We have nations where individuals are wanting to be reunited with family members, or where they have degrees that would suggest they have skills that we need. Those of course we can welcome into our country. We certainly need people on a temporary basis in the agricultural community that can come in on a migrant worker basis and perhaps move back and forth. These are visa opportunities that work for us and work for other nations. But surely there are some nations whose history or association with radical jihad would suggest that a very careful screening process, at best, is going to have to be put in place.
Right. Seems to me that starting with countries that are on the State Department's designated terror list would be a good place to start. But I guess what this begs is the question of how better, or what kind of improvements to our immigration and entrance policies do you think we should adopt to prevent jihadists from coming into the country in the first place? I mean, these people are not going to be coming with terrorists stamped on their foreheads. Do you think there are questions that our consular officers, for example, should be asking these applicants before they approve their visa applications?
Well, I would certainly hope so, and I would have expected that has already begun, but if not, it certainly should.
Right.
Which is that we should be very careful to be screening for people who have elements in their background or the countries they come from that would suggest that they might have terrorist roots, and certainly you can imagine if their passports are stamped with numerous trips to Afghanistan 10 years ago, that would be something you'd want to take into account.
Right.
And at the same time, if you've got a family from Brazil that has let's say a father living in Boston that's been here for 6 years, and he's working at a company there, and the family's wanting to be reunited. That's a very different setting. You welcome people of that nature, and they enhance our culture, they enhance our capability to compete globally. But at the same time, individuals who have elements in their background that suggest they present a risk to us, we're going to have to be far more careful with people of that nature. And of course, as we saw just in the last couple of days with the commissioner from New York City the police department, there is homegrown Muslim extremism which is developing in this country, which is also a great risk. So we're going to have to be very careful on domestic fronts as well as on our immigration front.
I'm glad you brought up that NYPD report because, of course, the typical response now from the likes of CARE and groups like it is that it amounts to unfair profiling, massive discrimination. How do you deal with groups like that? You've tangled with them before when you've made some bold comments about surveillance in mosques in Massachusetts and cooperating with the feds.
Well, in my view, we as a nation value very highly our civil liberties, and I certainly do, but we have to make sure that among our list of civil liberties, and perhaps at the top, at least in my view, of our civil liberties, is the right to be kept alive. We expect our government to protect us from enemies, foreign and domestic. And so there is a responsibility of government to be on the lookout for people who would harm our citizenry. And just as the commissioner, I heard him this morning, said, we will certainly follow people according to the law and wiretap people, again, according to the law, wherever they are, if they are doing things or speaking in such a way that would suggest that they're trying to do harm to this country. And so that would include in mosques, it would include in schools, it would include homes, wherever people are that represent a threat to us by virtue of what they've done or said. We of course are going to again get the appropriate legal authorization. But those legal authorizations in this process is one that's been laid out by the courts for some time. We're not going to violate that. There are no mass roundups or mass deportations or anything of that nature going on. But surely we have to recognize that there is within our society a small group of people who are preaching and teaching doctrines of hate and violent overthrow and terror, and we've got to follow those guys and track them and wiretap them, again within the confines of the law, but to make sure that we are protecting our most primary civil liberty, the right to be kept alive.
One last question. I want to bring it back to immigration, and actually follows a theme of what we've just been addressing here about fear of alienating certain politically correct groups. Mel Martinez, the chairman of the Republican Party, is criticizing your campaign and the Giuliani campaign for even addressing immigration enforcement. We saw this throughout the amnesty debate, where they would demonize immigration enforcement critics as being divisive and inflammatory. And I think among the RNC elite, there's this, I think, sham concern that somehow you're going to be alienating Latino voters. Do you share that worry? And what is your response to Martinez's criticism?
Well, I am concerned anytime I see any individual who takes an extreme position and sounds like they're anti-immigrant or anti-Hispanic. That would be, in my opinion, it's both shameful and harmful to our party and to our nation. But that certainly is not the posture which either Mayor Giuliani or myself have taken. I make sure in any conversation that I make with regards to immigration, I do my very best to continue to remind people that I value legal immigration, that I support legal immigration, that I support other people and cultures coming to our country, but I vehemently opposed illegal immigration. And I find, I must admit, I find it puzzling to listen to reports either in the media or by politicians that are not willing to make that clear distinction, because we are a nation of immigrants. It is a source of our great vitality as a nation, but at the same time we have always managed immigration, meaning that we have had something to say about who comes here, and the idea that instead we're going to let people who break the law be the ones who come here, that's a very strange thing. And so I respectfully disagree with a comment that and I didn't see Mel Martinez's comment, but we have a different view about that Senate bill. I think amnesty, as it was framed in that bill, was the wrong course for America, and I believe instead that enforcing our law, allowing those that are here illegally to get in line with everybody else, that's fine. But don't say to people who've come here illegally, hey, you're going to get a special pathway to become a legal resident or a permanent citizen. That in my view, is just not fair.
Thanks so much, Governor Romney.
Thank you, Michelle.